Hello world, welcome back to the Razor RC, and it's time for the full review of the Team Yokomo YZ-2 CAL 3.1. This has been on the market for about 2 or 3 months here in the US, and just been wanting to share my thoughts on this two-wheel drive 10 scale race buggy from Team Yokomo. This is my very first Yokomo. I've never had one of these kits, but always wanted to try one. Heard a lot of good things about it, so I thought I'd pick up the CAL 3.1. Now my local track is a carpet off-road track, so I picked up the CAL version, which is the carpet and Lee Martin version, I guess is what the L stands for. They also make a DTM version, which is the dirt Mayfield version. For those of you that drive on dirt or clay or any sort of true off-road type surface, but for carpet, AstroTurf, you want to get the CAL, which is what I picked up. So this is my particular kit. As you can see, it's been equipped with essentially Team Associated wheels and tires. I'm running Cactus wheels in the back, or Cactus Fusion, can't remember, Schumachers essentially. And then I don't even remember what these are called, Cut Staggers or something like that, whatever Schumacher calls these things. And then in terms of electronics, I'm running a Savax 1267 SG. I'm running a Hobbywing XR10 stock spec ESC, a little fake Sanwa receiver, the ARX 482R, and then Team Power's Actinium 17.5 turn V4, V4.0 motor. Also running full Wits Racing bearings throughout, so we do have a 20% off coupon code if you want to pick one of those up. Ceramic bearings do help a ton, especially if you're doing stock racing. Just frees up the drivetrain. Actually also makes it drive quite a bit smoother, a little more precise, a little more clean that way. You get less friction, but it also just kind of frees up the suspension, frees up, obviously the throttle application, all that kind of stuff. So even though it's meant, to make your car faster, it also actually, I think, helps it handle better as well. So 20% off coupon code. I'll throw link in the description below. And then running my Genzace 5000 milliamp red line batteries, 130C. So these are excellent batteries. I am actually running a full-size battery because this buggy is so light. Even with a full-size battery, no lightweight components at all. Still tons of wiring and stuff that I could probably trim down. This thing is at 1486 grams, so definitely easy to get under the Roar minimum, which I think is 1474 grams. So yeah, very lightweight body. Even have this extra shock tower protector here in the front that most people would not normally run, but we need that at our local carpet track. So the way this review works, just as usual, I go through 6 different categories, giving a rating from 1 to 5 stars. And those ratings are as compared to other two-wheel drive race buggies out there. So I also have the Team Associated B6.3, and actually I just picked up the B6.4. I have a Schumacher Cougar laydown, or LD2. I also had the original laydown. I also had a TLR 2250. So I'm pretty familiar with just about every two-wheel drive race buggy out there, and those ratings are going to mean 3 stars if it's average within this class, 5 stars if it's best in class, and 1 star if it's worst in class. And yeah, so yeah, let's get into the review. The first category is the build, and we're talking about how this was actually assembled. I didn't run into any issues. Similar to most Japanese vehicles, you do have lots of parts on part trees, so you will definitely need your flush cutters and trimming and snipping lots of pieces off of trees. Really high quality plastic, high quality components. This thing is made in Japan, and you can tell this is one of the highest quality manufactured vehicles I've ever owned. The X-ray stuff is excellent. I would say this is just right up there with the X-ray stuff. The plastics, metals, everything's super nice. Even the screws and stuff are higher quality than your typical screws you get on a kit. Kind of deep socket screws, so you don't strip the screws as easily. I mean, you can tell even on these bleeder screws, they're cap head screws, so that's really, really nice. Everything seems super high quality. Some weird things, some parts they use wheel nuts, or I'm sorry, plain nuts instead of lock nuts, like these little nuts here. They're not lock nuts, you just thread them on and then hope they don't fall off. So you definitely will want to Loctite pieces, and they don't really talk about where to Loctite pieces. So I would say if you're not experienced with a two-wheel drive kit, this may be a little bit trickier. You may find pieces started falling off as first time you drive this thing, because you wouldn't really be aware of some of these things. Very fast build, probably with the fastest two-wheel drive race kit I've ever built, and I've never owned a Yokomo, so really easy to build. Other things I probably didn't like, You do have to cut the body and wing. You know, that's pretty typical for race kits nowadays, but there are some other brands like TLR that do pre-cut those for you, so you do spend extra time on that, and obviously the parts on parts trees. I did have one issue, which is that it was missing a diff insert here in the rear. This does have an adjustable diff height in the transmission, and there's 4 different inserts you're supposed to get. Mine was only coming with 3, so I did talk to A-Main where I picked this up, and they just sent out the part right away, so no issues there. But a little weird that it was missing a part. Didn't really expect that. It looked like it had fallen off the parts tree, so maybe when they were manufacturing this, it fell on the floor and somebody forgot about it. But yeah, that was the only real issue I had, but I did get a piece right away from A-Main. They do tend to take care of their customers really, really well. Actually, A-Main is an excellent place to pick up this thing. So build-wise, I'm going to give it an average score, 3 stars. You'd have to cut parts off parts trees. The body you do have to cut. The wing you do have to cut. The diff inserts were kind of missing. Those are all kind of typical. I was still able to run this vehicle, you know, out of the box just using different inserts. Nothing really a serious problem, so I'm not going to ding it too much for that. And it did go together really, really well. I mean, all the parts fit perfectly. You didn't have to sand or file anything. A lot of other brands out there, you might actually have to make remount holes or file down parts that don't, you know, fit together perfectly. So from that perspective, it was good. But yeah, there are some other those minor issues that hurt its score a little bit. The YZ-2 is pretty typical. When Yokomo first came out, I mean, not first came out, but they kind of had a gentleman's agreement with Team Associate. They would make the YZ-4 4-wheel drive race buggies, and Team Associate would only make 2-wheel drive buggies. Team Associate kind of broke that and came out with what is the I forget what's called, the JX4 or something like that. But Jason Rona came out with a 4-wheel drive buggy, and kind of broke that agreement. So Yokomo eventually started making their own 2-wheel drive buggies, and I remember seeing that one of the early YZ-2s about 5 or 6 years ago that had the laydown transmission, and it was like the first buggy out there on the market with the laydown transmission. All the other ones had 3-gear or 4-gear transmissions, rear motor, maybe sort of mid motor, but a stacked transmission here. And Yokomo came out with this laydown transmission and kind of blew my mind. I remember saying, what the heck are they doing? That looks crazy. But yeah, they've been kind of at the forefront, especially on the carpet side, the AstroTurf side, making high traction type vehicles. And this is a really good performer. Now, if you look at the design, it does have the electronics pretty far forward, still has a lay down servo, fairly small electronics tray there, and then a battery pretty much in the middle. It does come with a steel hinge pin brace, which I think is really, really nice. Like the Associate, you tend to have to buy a brass piece or a steel piece, but this comes out of the box with that piece. Aluminum chassis, of course, I think it's 3 millimeters. But yeah, really nice design, fairly typical at this point. If you look at this, you look at an Associate kit, they don't look all that different. This looks fairly similar to like a B63 or B62. Not too many big changes. Easy access transmission, does have the adjustable diff heights, of course, the adjustable axle heights, carbon fiber little steering arms, adjustable turnbuckles throughout, easy access turnbuckle holes so you can get at the ball studs, front wing. Yeah, just overall fairly typical. I don't think it's anything too earth-shattering, but I would say a couple things. One is that the parts quality is super high on this. I'm not sure if that's really a design thing or a build thing, but for sure it does impact the way it drives. That's really, really nice. Fairly weight-forward design. I think the B63, you couldn't get the battery this far forward. I think on the B64, you can get it about mid, sort of 50-50 weight right there in the middle of the chassis, which I think helps a ton on carpet or AstroTurf. Yeah, nothing too unusual or strange about this. A couple things I didn't like. It does have plastic camber blocks, both front and rear. And the rear one has no adjustments, really just has one hole there for that single ball stud. Some other vehicles out there have aluminum ones, especially in the rear, so would have not been nice to see that. Does have the carbon fiber shock tires. I think they're 4 or 5 millimeters thick, so fairly thick shock tires. All the different shock mounting locations you would expect, front and rear, top and bottom, so no issues there. It does come with sway bars front and back, so that's pretty nice. But yeah, a fairly typical design. I'm going to give it a little bit above average. 4 stars out of 5. It does have the steel hinge pin brace. It does have that weight forward type design. It does have the easy access disc, which some other brands out there don't even have yet. So yeah, a little bit above average, but not best in class, but certainly pretty nice. Now the YZ-2 performance-wise did take me a little while to get this driving the way I liked. Out of the box, the kit setup, in my opinion, does not work too well on US style tracks. US style tracks tend to be kind of hard landing type jumps, oftentimes landing on flat surfaces, fairly tight, a lot of 180 degrees. They're not really like large flowing type tracks that you might find in Europe, for example. And I did find the kit setup not very good. I did end up having to change the springs. So I'm running red associated V2 springs up front, 12 millimeter, and blue associated springs in the rear, 12 millimeter. That seems pretty good. I did have to mess around with the pistons. I'm actually running 2 by 1.5 millimeter piston holes up front and 2 by 1.7 millimeter hole pistons in the rear. These are the thin pistons in the rear like the kit setup, but in the front they don't make 2 by 1.5s in the thin pistons, so I'm using the full size pistons. That makes it, jump and land a ton better. I did kind of play around with the shock package quite a bit, played around with the roll centers a little bit. I did remove the front sway bar, and it's driving pretty good. Still can traction roll a little bit, so I don't have it perfectly dialed, but I would say the way it's set up, the way I have it, it is competitive for sure with the associated buggies out there. I've certainly driven with some other drivers at my same skill level where they were driving different manufacturing vehicles, and this was no problems keeping up. I think competitive wise it is totally fine. Certainly people are winning and races at my local track with these things. So performance wise, I think it's really good. The only thing I would say is that it does require some setup change, where something like the B6.3 or B6.4, it'll pretty much drive perfect out of the box on American style tracks. This, it will not. I think pretty much anyone, at least in the US, will have to make changes to it. You do need to have some understanding of setup to kind of figure out directions to go. And there are, sort of setup sheets out there from Lee Martin and other people that you can take a look at, get some ideas. But that is one thing that I would say hurts the performance a bit. Once you get it driving well, no issues with the performance. I think it's totally fine. One advantage I would say of the Yokomo is that it feels extremely precise. I think the quality of the parts, the way everything fits together really, really well, you're a little more confident, you're a little more precise, it's a little more consistent, corner to corner, lap to lap, that you may not get with the associated buggy. I actually find this, even with the Schumacher, I think it's slightly less consistent than this buggy. And I think a lot of it is just due to the parts quality. This thing is put together like a Swiss watch. It's just so nice and so exact. You feel it on the track. It's kind of hard to convey in person or through words, but that is kind of my impression of this buggy, that it's a little more exacting than some of the other brands out there. So performance wise, I'm going to give it above average score, 4 stars. Really the main downside is that you do have to do some of your own setup work to get it driving the way it probably should be set up on American style tracks at least. But once you get it dialed, I think it's excellent and certainly above average, 4 stars. The YZ-2 hasn't broken anything on me. I'm only running a 17.5 turn motor. I'm running on a fairly small track. You don't get super high speeds or top speeds or anything like that. There aren't like too many like massive jumps or anything that I've had to run into. But I have taken some pretty hard hits. Certainly have case jumps. Certainly have slammed into walls and stuff like that. And I have not broken anything. Some people have remarked that the front end may be a little bit weak. I know people that have broken spindles, steering blocks, even arms up front. I had no issue, so I can't really say that this thing is not durable. But one thing I would comment is that the buggy overall looks a little beefier. I mean, all the parts seem a little more dainty to me than say a B63 or B64. I think the American or US brands tend to kind of like over engineer the durability in some cases, in my opinion. They really go crazy, even with like turnbuckles and stuff. I think like the TLRs are 3.5 or 4 millimeter turnbuckles. These are not like massively over engineered. Everything seems fairly precise. and exact, and actually a little bit lightweight. I do think this buggy weighs a little less than most of the other brands out there, but I do also think that the parts don't look quite as durable as some of the other ones. Certainly in the rear, you got the plastic camber block instead of the aluminum that most brands will have. Turnbuckles are a little thinner than other brands. TLRs are definitely thicker. So yeah, overall, no real concerns about durability, but I'm not going to give it a full score. I'm actually going to give it an average score because I have seen people break these things. I personally haven't, but in my opinion, probably has average durability. Pretty typical, I think, for a two-wheel drive buggy. And I think if you're running 17.5, you're not going to have any real issues. I certainly haven't. But yeah, I don't get the impression that this thing is as durable as some of the other brands. So I'm going to give it an average score of 3 stars. Yokomo is a smaller brand here in the US. I believe AMain is the US distributor, so most of the stuff you're wanting to get is going to come from AMain. I don't know if there are any other stores, online stores and stuff, that carry Yokomo parts. And to be honest with you, you can't get everything that you want all the time. Certainly stuff goes out of stock at AMain, things get back ordered, they are not going to carry every single optional part. So that I think is a little tricky, a little annoying, and makes things a little more difficult to be a Yokomo driver or owner. Maintenance wise, no issues. Everything is really easy to work on. Some of the screws where you might expect like 3mm screws, sometimes they use like 2.5mm screws. Some of the things like the washers or the nuts I told you about are not lock nuts. That's a little bit weird. Taking off this fan mount is a little bit annoying because like these lock nuts here on the bottom, they're just kind of set in plastic, and when you try to unscrew these screws, they just kind of spin within the plastic mount, so that can be a little bit annoying. You end up having to sort of try to hold it down with some pliers or something. So some of the maintenance is a little bit weird. Like there's nuts actually here inside the front brace, so when you're unscrewing these screws here underneath the bumper, you can't flip it upside down because then those nuts will basically fall out. So little weird things like that, but I wouldn't say it's bad, just a little quirky. So on the support and maintenance side, I am going to give it a below average score. Certainly Yokomo parts you'll want to stock up on your own because your local hobby shop is not going to carry too much stuff. I'm going to give them a 2-star rating in the support and maintenance category because I do think it's below average, at least here in the US. Now if you live in Japan, maybe if you live in Europe, things might be different. I'm sure parts availability is a lot better in Japan. When I visited Japan and went to some RC hobby shops, they certainly carried way more Yokomo stuff than say Team Associated stuff. But here in the US where I live, I do have to grade it based on what I see and how easy it is to get parts here where I live. So in the support and maintenance category, 2 stars. The YZ-2 CAL 3.1 and the DTM 3.1 sell for $409.99 here in the United States. That's fairly typical. Pretty much every buggy out there costs about the same. The Associated is $400, the X-Ray is $410, same price. Even the TLR 2250 DC Elite, which is a fairly old buggy at this point, it's like 3 or 4 years old. That is $419 or $420. So price-wise, this is fairly in line. I do think you get some extra value because this is made in Japan. The parts quality, everything is a little bit higher grade than your typical two-wheel drive race kit, up there with X-Ray. I do think the TLR, the Associated buggies are a little bit worse, but there are some things, I feel like it's missing a bit. The body you have to cut, lots of parts on parts trees, plastic camber mounts, plastic shock caps, which are okay. Most buggies and kits are coming with plastic shock caps at this point. It does give you some extra value with the steel hinge pin brace, but there are no steel weights in the front. I'm still using the kit plastic ESC tray. I don't think they make a steel under mount weight for the servo, but yeah, overall I think value wise and how I rate it is what you get in the box as opposed to what you pay, and what you get in the box looks about average, a little bit better in some areas, a little bit worse in some areas. So I'm going to give it a 3-star rating in the value. Price wise, again, it's pretty much in line with all the other brands out there, so again, a 3-star rating in the value category. So my final thoughts on the Yokomo YZ-2 CAL 3.1 or YZ-2 if you live in England or Australia or whatever. Excellent buggy, drives well, requires some setup work for sure, at least here in the US. Value-wise, totally fine. Actually, considering what you pay, which is fairly typical for a two-wheel drive buggy, it's not expensive, and I think the parts quality is super high. There are probably some optional parts you want to look into, maybe a steel camber block, maybe a steel camber block here in the rear, maybe some different sway bars, maybe a slipper limiter, which they do make. So yeah, some parts maybe you want to upgrade, maybe not. The real downside, I think, to owning a Yokomo is that parts availability is going to be more difficult here in the US. You definitely will want to stock up on parts. Maybe get to know a team driver or two if they can get you parts. That's really the only main downside, I would say. I think value-wise, performance, build, design, everything is, you know, above average or average at worst. This is a high-performing vehicle. Certainly no concerns at all with the performance. This drives really, really well. A lot of precision in this vehicle. But is it best for a new driver? Probably not, because of that parts availability. Probably not, because it does require some sit-up work, and if you're brand new to racing, you might have some trouble getting this thing to drive exactly right, because out of the box, I do think it is not quite right. But yeah, I love this buggy. It drives awesome. I had this, the Schumacher, the Associated. I love all of them. I think the Associated is probably the easiest buggy to own. Schumacher and the Yokomo require a little more work. This probably a little more work than even the Schumacher because of parts availability. With the Schumacher, you can get stuff at Discount RC Store where I get my stuff or other places. So you can get Schumacher parts reasonably well online, and stuff does tend to keep in stock. Where the Yokomo stuff, it does seem like a little bit harder to own. Parts availability is a little more difficult. Even kind of the understanding the instructions, a lot of stuff's in Japanese, so that's a little bit weird. Not a major obstacle, but yeah, I don't know. Things are a little more quirky with the Yokomo. So anyways, those are my thoughts on the Yokomo YZ-2 CAL 3.1. Throw down some comments down below if you have thoughts on this, if you have one, if you have any suggestions, if you have other online stores you recommend buying from, let me know, because I'm always looking to find out where I can pick up more parts for this when A-Main doesn't have stuff in stock. And I will have a link in the description below if you want to pick one of these up from A-Main, or pretty much anything else from A-Main. A small portion of that does help out the channel and help me produce videos like this. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to hit the like, share, subscribe, add notifications buttons. Look for more videos soon. And thanks for watching.